Welcome, everybody, to Tartarian Mysteries Revealed. My name is Rob Yox of Full Spectrum Universe. With me, as always, is Joan of Angels from joanofangels.com, Joan of Angels on YouTube. Joan, how are you today?
Oh God, Rob, every time we start, I see this Tartarian mysteries revealed. I get so excited. I feel like I'm in a grand theater and that we're going to actually see kind of this parade in front of us of history. So we know what's going on. So we have an exciting show for everyone today, don't we?
Absolutely, absolutely. Today's show is going to be a lot of symbolism, but also a lot of something that goes along with Tartaria tremendously. When we talk about Tartaria, we talk about these world fairs and the specifics of the world fairs, the symbolization of who was at these world fairs, why these world fairs took place, and what the motives were and how they were constructed. I mean, we have so many different avenues to address when it comes to these world fairs.
All right, guys. So we are going to start our deep dive. Rob, what do you think attracts you so much about the fairs themselves? Why are we actually talking about fairs?
Well, I think what attracts me the most is the stunning aspect of the fact that the construction of them is mysterious. The what they say happened and the time that it happened for the buildings and how things were constructed was just it doesn't add up. And this is one of the biggest questions of Tartario is because these world fairs not only was this a place to traffic many of the indentured servant slave class of the Tartarians throughout, they were selling babies off to the highest bidders and these things, but the construction
Just
itself
mentioning.
is a mystery. It's a mystery. Something that holds up to 300, 400,000 people, they say, took 53 days to build. And that's even in today's standards with our technology, 53 days to build a coliseum of that size doesn't work. It doesn't add up. And there's a lot of things that
Right.
don't add up with this.
I get it. When I was looking at the Philadelphia World's Fair in 1876, they did it over like 12 or 14, 17 months, and they built 10 buildings a month. Now, that means every 3 days they completed a building. So we are really looking at how things do not add up. Why did they take them down so fast? How did they make these most majestic statues and these parks with electricity and light in a time that it was still sort of primitive technology in the rest of the world? And why the heck did they destroy them after? And also, you're bringing it up, the children, the babies that they had in incubators that were, get this, babies were an attraction. You come to see them and you bid on them and take them home. Are you kidding me? Nowadays, that would be sex trafficking, Rob, just to
Absolutely.
say.
Absolutely. And it's wild that that was even considered. And this is one of the reasons why when we look at it, we look at these expeditions and we say, is this a nefarious type of aspect of the Tartarian life? Or not that they were the ones, but was it the controllers that were putting these things on? Or was it the Tartarians themselves? And here's where this polarity comes, just like in everything else in our lives, right? There's good and evil everywhere. I truly believe that this was put on by the controllers, but the Tartarians were embedded in the inner workings of these world fairs. And these world fairs represented the most grandiose technology, the most grandiose type of attractions that could possibly come at this time in the world. And with what we're seeing, these grandiose type of amusement parks and buildings are either way ahead of their time or from a time period very well lost in the ashes or rubbles of ancient cultures. And that's where the mystery comes in is when we look at some of these buildings,
Right.
they are like the great Roman Colosseums and the Roman architecture. And we're going to show you what those statues look like so you can see it as well while we're talking about it. I'm going to pull up.
Right, right. I think we should show it. It is true. It's like looking at a movie set of the most
Absolutely.
gorgeous, exquisite, the Roman Empire, the Grecian empires, and how could they have built that in such a short time is right. So that is one. And who in the world would be crazy enough to tear them down? The most magnificent structures. So, and also remember something. This is in the 1800s, Rob, right? So the rest
Yeah.
of the world was not living in buildings like this, were they?
No, they were eating dinner by candlelight because electricity wasn't common knowledge back in this time. It was there, but it was only given to the elites. And
Right.
first, this what we're looking at right here in this picture is the 1893 Chicago World Fair. And the reason why I honed in on this specific one is because you see the center body of water. That is the entire area is covered in that water. So they use this water to build canals like Venice, where people could take boats to different sections on this specific World Fair. But here's the other part, these buildings are built on top of that water. So these opulent, magnificent, tremendous structures needed some sort of way to rise above the water and be stable, withholding at least 300,000 people. At this specific World Fair, one in every four Americans alive at that time had visited this World Fair. That is the wild aspect of this. So many people came to this specific World Fair was that it was a quarter of the United States population came to this World Fair.
Well, yeah. Quick question, Rob. That makes me wonder is looking at what the population was of America. Like, if we could only look at every 10 years from the very first World's Fair, which was 1876, through the 1900s, I'd be really curious because I know after that there was another reset. So I'm really curious because I don't think we had a huge population at that time. So 1 in 4. I think we were going through that reset. So I'm going to go see if I can check those details. But very fascinating. I find it really stunning that they could build this advanced technology with all the electrics. You have to understand, we're looking at it from a photo, but if you were there at night, right, wasn't it all lit up? And that kind of electricity is really hard to do, guys. Now, was this Tesla energy or was it Thomas Edison energy this time?
So, at the very beginning of this specific World Fair, Thomas Edison's electric company bid $1.72 million to get this specific contract with 93,000 incandescent light bulbs to be used at this World Fair. Now, they actually went with the unknown guy named Nikolai Tesla at the time. Tesla was known, but not known for selling product or doing opulent style, type of theatrics like this. He was just known for, having his company and doing his inventions. He wasn't known to go out of his way to help a world fair of this stage, but he was also getting to this point where he was going to give back to people. And Nikolai Tesla is a different rabbit hole we're going to go down completely when we talk about him himself. But it's important because this what Nikola Tesla did was he was able to draw enough energy to light this place up that no matter where you were within the 7 states that surrounded Chicago, you could see the World Fair light up the night sky. That's how bright it was. There's a statue that's on top of one of the buildings, and it was lit up with these beams of light that looked like they called her the woman of light because it looked like the light was emanating from the statue. That's how crazy it was. We're going to talk about another statue at the Chicago World Fair a little bit later, which is the Statue of the Republic and what it symbolizes and what happens. But just to get back to the construction very quickly, there is a theory that these specific buildings that they had were already in place. And what they did is they spray painted them with this new type of spray paint that they had to make everything look brand new. And that's one of the reasons why the destruction of these buildings. Think about the opulence of this
Mm-hmm.
specific World Fair. It runs for 6 months. Then after 6 months, you level it. When I mean level it, you use dynamite and level it.
Right,
It's
right.
liquefied. There's nothing left of it. If it was
Who
that
builds who
grandiose,
builds buildings like that, Rob, and that they're going to destroy? Okay, so I
Tartarians
agree.
built buildings like that.
Who did the Tartarians? No.
Absolutely. Yeah, the ones that they were looking at are Tartarian
Well, they're
style buildings.
Tartarian buildings. Yes, that's not what I meant. I meant who builds buildings and tears them down instantly.
Oh, yeah. And not only that, that World Fair could be an attraction for years to come.
Forever,
That
forever. Like it was like so. I remember the World's Fairs. So I went to the World's Fairs. My dad was so proud of himself. We had seasons tickets for 6 months or a year, and it was spectacular. It was on water. You would want to go back forever to that kind of attraction. It wasn't just a one-off thing because it had artifacts from all around the world and very, very fascinating things they were trying to bring out. Like I think I had mentioned the Philadelphia World's Fair. I think that's where they brought out the first electric popcorn maker or a candied popcorn. So they used it, they did use it for industry. They did it for a lot of things to promote new industries, new inventions. And certainly the phone. I think that they had one World's Fair all about, this new phone. There was a word for it. I have to look at it. But it was like this new people connection device that they brought out as well.
that's wild. And here's the other thing about this too, right? And it just came to me now. We didn't discuss this before, but if if there is a quarter of America's population coming to one of these fairs, and you decided to change a specific point in history, then made that an attraction at this World Fair, by word of mouth, you could literally spread that misinformation to half of the American population, and slowly and surely it would spread to everywhere. And this is how they got people together to rewrite history potentially, to
So,
rewrite certain histories.
okay, so I understand that, what you're saying. What do you think then? Because I think you're right. They did massive programming and propaganda. So whatever was at that fair was part of what they were now introducing to these new people. Because remember, they had been already wiping out the Tartarians by then. They were placing the Tartarians as political prisoners and in mental institutions. And they were already farming out, and the orphan trains were starting to happen. So who were these new people that they were educating and brainwashing into? We don't
That
actually know.
I think it was just a mix of an influx of immigration from different areas at this time. By this time, there were famines, there were societies breaking down in Europe where a lot of people came over. And one of the things that strikes me as really wild about what you just said too is this is who were these people? And now what we're doing is this is coming up to one of these great financial resets. So this is right beforehand. So they're planting seeds to tell them certain things about what was to manipulate what is to come. And then after that reset, they can play savior. Like, look, we told you. We told you things were going to get
Okay.
crazy. That makes a
Now,
lot of sense.
now you're blowing me away. Okay. Because the next thing is, okay, so we had a new population that came as immigrants to this country that didn't have the class and the sophistication and the education the Tartarians did, nor did they have the skills and the telepathy and the they didn't have that. And so they already were replacing the population, because we know the reset went into the early 1900s also with that flu epidemic. So, Rob, I want to say to you that at the current moment of time, our country has millions of immigrants being brought in. Not want to say that word too much on our live stream, but they're being brought in, and we know we're going through a global reset.
Hmm.
Is this part of, oh my God, that they're bringing in a new population to replace us?
I think that it has a bit of that, but I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to flood the first world with the third world people because it'll destabilize the economy. And then they can come in as the saviors
Well,
again. And it's a kind of history repeating itself all over again.
but nevertheless, there's a new population coming that's not American. Okay,
Hmm.
not we're not talking nationality. We're talking about background. Our
Right.
culture, our voting, our this or that, our stake in America. What we're bringing in is people with no stake. So yes, I understand it's being brought for economic and political reasons, but I also can see that, you know what, a reset coming, and we have some new population here. And so I'm just trying to, we're
Yeah,
throwing out, guys, not things that are written in stone, but Rob triggered a thought. I'm curious, put down your comments, because we're opening to triggering your thoughts and your thinking.
exactly,
And you
exactly.
did
And
stun me with that. You did
it
stun
was a
me with
little
that.
wild, right? It was a little wild, and it just came to me too, because what we're seeing is we see this cyclistic nature of history with these custodians, and how what they did back then is exactly what's going on right now. And they're trying to play that savior after they destabilize everything, and that's really the issue. But there's representation in that history that shows that they never liked the American way of life to begin with. And that goes to the Statue of the Republic. The Statue of the Republic was supposed to be the most opulent golden statue that represents everything from freedom to American exceptionalism to everything. And right after this specific World Fair in Chicago, and they demoed everything, they destroyed that as well. Now, there's rumor that this specific statue could be completely made of gold, or if it was gold leaf wrapped around bronze. And regardless, the symbolism of what that means to destroy that statue shows that the custodians were the ones who were putting on these world fairs, because again, that could have been an attraction that would have made Chicago be a bastion of opulence and beauty for many, many years to come, regardless if it had to be upkept and everything else like that. But there was something about those buildings, something about that statue. After 6 months and people saw the grandiosity of it, couldn't remain. And that's what we're questioning.
You know, that makes me think of something else then. That I understand there were major world fairs, but then there were smaller fairs also, which still did the same thing, built amazing buildings and then tore them down. Is it possible that all of these world fairs were built on the original star cities? Those cities that were still, apparently they were all across America and across Europe, and not that we know about them today, because we really don't, but they were fully functioning cities that were beautiful as the star forts, and they all had power. They had that free energy from the sun. So do you think that it's possible that many of these, even the smaller fairs, might have been, created in those cities, and then they had an excuse to tear it down? Oh, it was an expo, we're going to tear it down. They don't tear down expos nowadays, guys, because it's too expensive to build one. But do maybe there's a possibility that that's connected, a way to hide those cities.
I think you're absolutely on target with that, because if we look at the times to construct and erect these buildings, and it would have to have already established buildings where they were to make this work with the grand nature of what these world fairs look like for these specific. And that's to me, I'm not saying it is, but to me it's the most likely explanation. A lot of these buildings they built around, they were there, they just repainted them, and then they used them, and when they were finished, because if that paint ever faded away, people would see the actual scoring of the stone or whatever the case is, so it would reveal more.
So they
And then,
painted over it so it looked
yes,
new, and they couldn't allow us to see that because the paint would disintegrate, and then we'd see that it was actually an old building, and they were trying to cover it up. um, I don't know if you have pictures of some of the Chicago. I have some pictures of the Philadelphia World's Fair that I'd love to show how majestic they were, just so
yeah, pull
people
them
can
up.
get a visual.
And while you're pulling that up, we want to talk about the technology real quick too. The
You
technology at
talk
these
about the
fairs.
technology. I'm just going to pull this up. Now, this guy's is let's see, it's the Philadelphia's World Fair. Let's see if we can kind of see. Can we see what they look like? I'm in StreamYard.
It's a
Yeah.
little difficult.
Is it a little difficult? Okay, let
Yeah,
me just,
it's a little small.
Is it? Okay. Can we see it when I open it up like this? Or maybe
That's
I
a
can
little
open
bit
this
better.
one. Okay, can you see that one?
It's hard to see it. It's still really small.
Oh, that's too bad. Okay. Well, I'm going to just show one more anyway, just because I want you to see they're like golden. And this is extraordinary technology that they were doing. So you guys can go and look up the Philadelphia World's Fair, and then we're going to get back into the Chicago World's Fair. But there's so many that you can dive into. You can even see pictures of babies being auctioned or in
It
their little, and that was another thing, those, that form of taking care of premature babies and the incubators. That was what they also, they showed at the fair. They featured
it was
incubators.
really wild that they would have it's literal babies for sale is what it is, and it's kind of crazy that we would even, at that time that would even be a possibility of what they would allow, but they did, and to me it's really wild that was
They
the
needed
case.
workers.
Well,
They
that's
needed
true. That's true.
workers.
So before we close shop today, I want to talk about some of the advanced technologies that they had at these specific fairs, and the ground. We talked a little bit about it before, but the groundbreaking things that we saw. And first, I wanted to show a picture of the Ferris wheel. This was the first Ferris wheel that was ever erected, and as you can see, it was not just a two-person car; it was a 20-person place to sit, relax, have fun, and it went up to it was 4,500 foot tall, and this thing went up to 6 miles per hour in a round motion. So you and all your friends could get into one car and pile
Have a
in,
party.
and you could see to the state line when you got to the top of this thing. You could see all the way to the end of Chicago and beyond. It was so far because of the way that they had it. Now, another technology that they had that was really crazy was this walkway. It was in
Oh,
a
I saw
horseshoe shape,
those.
and this walkway had benches on it. It was like the walkways that you see at the airport that you step on, and it takes you down those long hallways. They had benches. They had little areas where you could sit and have a picnic. We're talking about 1893, and they
They
have
were
an
citizens.
escalator-like walkway that's taking people all around this fair. To me, that shows that there is some sort of technology here that was ahead of its time, but also at the Ferris wheel, it it was really to me it showed that they were really looking for that amusement park feel as well, but it was a place of happiness. People were having a great time seeing these innovations. And one more thing that they created at these world fairs was what did I say before? It was the popcorn you get at the Cracker Jacks. That's it, Cracker
Yeah,
Jacks.
Cracker Jacks was created for the
So
fairs.
now, if we make a connection to the Americana of some of these fairs in Chicago, that Cracker Jacks becomes America's pastimes, baseball's favorite snack, sold at every baseball game. Cracker
Right.
Jacks. So we see this connection with what the representation was of these specific types of fairs and how they did it with the Statue of the Republic, the Cracker Jacks, the Ferris wheels. This was pure opulence, and it was just an amazing place
It
to
was
be, and
stunning.
that's why it's great. But at the same time, there's a dark aspect to it. It's, hey, look at what's going on over here, and when you get there, we're going to program you. We're going to send you off with our narrative. We're going to change things, and that is the controller's way of inserting themselves into your everyday life. And that is the biggest aspect for me that I take away from this is while it was grand and amazing, there is a custodial overreach that is beginning before a reset. Because
Right.
after the reset, they're going to come in and they're going to take everything. Everything.
Right. And look, there's even talk that World War One and some of the other wars that we've had were designed specifically to tear down some of these buildings and to get rid of them. If they couldn't, there's only so many churches they could convert a building into, or so many mental institutions they can convert them into. So they had to remove them so that that people wouldn't question. So we see some of that. I find it interesting that we're talking about the Chicago Fair in the 1890s, 1895, was it? 1896?
1893.
1893. In 1895, we know that book came out on Baron Trump, The Life and Times of Baron Trump, which was published in 1895 by Lockwood. And it talks all about Baron Trump going off to Russia with his uncle Don Trump. And we know that Tesla was somehow involved in this time travel also. So I find the timing of it really interesting.
That's intriguing. That's intriguing
It's
because,
intriguing. It may not even be connected, but it's intriguing.
well, and usually when you have a thought like that and it comes up, there is a connection because your brain is putting two and two together from what you've heard. And I
Right,
think
from our discussion. Mm-hmm.
right. And I think that these world fairs were a way to them to solidify the destruction of all things Tartarian. And I think that these world fairs were set up in places where there were these Tartarian hubs, and they
Right.
still lived in a sense of holding the old traditions, and they had to destroy them.
They had to
Because
just completely destroy every last remnant and also the people. And so, I think what I find interesting, Rob, is one of the ways I got you interested in talking about this, because you were discounting the whole thing, was when I sent you that video that compared even the Great Flood, that global reset back then, that humanity had, the giants and the angels had made it with humanity. So therefore, they had created a population that deserved to be destroyed. And
right.
now they're doing that again. So they've done it over and over and over again. And we're just looking for the evidence to find where we can find similarities to what's going on today.
Well, another aspect of what we're looking at too is we call ourselves the new Tartarians, right? So now we're looking back on these areas that were lost to time and history for so long without the real evidence of the real stories coming to fruition. And
Right.
what we have done is now shine a light onto those stories so people can breathe life into that narrative again and say, hey, look, this was what it was about. While it looks opulent and beautiful, this is the real story. So now these people who didn't have a voice for so long are now having a voice through us and showing at least, whoever watches these videos that there was this grand and opulent culture, this grand and opulent people who were spiritually advanced in so many ways that we have yet to even discover. But we're breathing life back into the Tartarian mystery. And that
Mhm.
also makes us the new Tartarians because we're following in the footsteps of elders that came before us. We sit at their feet and we learn from them. And this is the aspects in which we further ourselves and humble ourselves to the fact that these specific peoples were so amazing. And, I think it's just incredible.
And truly, that kind of culture has disappeared. We don't have it at all in our civilization right now. That kind of advanced culture. However, I do think that there's a revival coming, and people are starting to awaken to their gifts and to the possibility. If the Tartarians could have been here and created that kind of civilization using what's here on Earth, we can too. And so we can be aware of that. And I think we need to know that.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. And I think this is a great place to
And
shut down on the world fairs. But go ahead. Go ahead.
well, they shut down the World's Fairs. I can tell you, having been to the World Fair, I think it was the 60s, it was magnificent. You wanted to be there. Everyone and everything from around the world that you can see. But I'll tell you what I'm thinking about as we're talking. I'm thinking, oh my God, Joan, I have so much homework to do now. I got to go back and look at the population of the world, of America. What was the population in the 1800s and the 1900s? How did it grow? And what was that really looking like in some of the cities? And, I'm thinking about some of the places we could find evidence, like the encyclopedias, the early encyclopedias that are still around if you can find a copy of the early American Britannicas. Like, I bet they have information that we no longer see because they've changed history since then. Look at how they're censoring everyone off the internet if you have information that doesn't jive with their information. And they're changing statistics and they're not revealing it. And so the idea could be that there may be information, if any of you have some of those old books, to start researching in them and looking to see, look up World's Fairs. Let's see what the older books say about those World Fairs as well.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I think that's important, Rob.
I think it absolutely is, and we find things in these older books that are washed away, or what they call whitewashed from history. I just did a quick search on what the population was in 1890, and the 1890 census says there's just about 63 million people in the United States.
Really, because in 1905, about 500 million, what was the estimate? Was it 500 million worldwide? 1/3 of America's population was wiped out in the early 1900s due to that World's Fair. Mm-hmm. You're saying that there were only 63 million in the US at that time.
Yes.
It would be interesting to check the census for.
Well, this leads to the baby boom era. The baby boom era, and then into World War I and World War II, which is there's a tremendous amount of death in World War II and I. That's from 1914 to 1945. So we still have about 30 years up to that point, about 25 years. So there is enough time to have some children from that aspect. And if we figure that everybody has 2 children, which is not the case, but it would double it, right? So that's 185 million people, but it's wild because we have 332 million today, and back then it was only less than 120 years ago, or a little bit longer than that. It was 140 years ago. It was not even half that. It's kind of wild how fast the booms happen, and when they happen as well, especially with things like the Great Depression, the Great Flu epidemic, so on and so forth. That is disseminating that population and killing a lot of it, but yet we still found a way to keep progressing and having double ups, I guess. It's really wild.
I don't know, Rob, but we're going down a rabbit hole, guys, and we are so excited you're joining us. If you are interested in this, start doing the research. Go into some of those old encyclopedias. Start looking at history and see where you can see the inconsistencies. Like you can see the inconsistencies, Rob, in those old photographs, say of San Francisco in before the fire. And it was supposed to be a huge city with a large population, and yet you see no one in the streets in some of these photographs. How could that be?
That's really wild.
Right? So, guys, we're going to look to you to help us do some of this research. Rob, this has been a great show. I just love looking at all things Tartarian. I am waking up, I think. What about you?
I totally agree. And one of the great things about this is it's uncovering so many different paths to more rabbit holes that I can jump down, because I love doing that. So I'm going to keep going, and we're going to keep pushing on and make this happen, and to overturn every stone we possibly can.
I want to point out to everyone that, I know that the reason I do this is that I feel like without our memories, we're lost. Without our history and the insights that come from being part of some kind of culture and ancestral relations, without knowing exactly what has happened, we're doomed basically to repeat all of that over and over and over again. And so even as a human here on this planet, knowing who we really are and what our origins are and our potential and capabilities is really important to our growth and to our ascension process. So to even raise we talk about raising our vibratory frequency and walking on this positive timeline, knowing who we are and where we've come from is really important to us in that perspective. And that's actually why I'm so interested in this, Rob. I'm obsessed with this knowledge.
I completely agree. I couldn't have said it better myself. And I think that this is, to know where we've come from is to not be lost.
Right.
And I agree 100%. I think that this is the path we need to take with every culture and everything that we find, and figure it out to the finest points that we can, because delineating that will give us the information that we so desperately seek.
Right. And you know, the relevance is this: they're attempting another reset. So we've already, guys, we have as a population already been through several resets, you know, including the Great Flood and these mud flood. We have been through all this. Our ancestors have, in some way, shape, or form. So this is important to us because we don't want to be caught up in their new reset.
Absolutely,
We're
absolutely.
going to meet you on the other side of this, guys, and continue our deep dive discussions.
That's it. Thank you everybody for watching us. Please share this out, like, share, and subscribe, and hope to spread this information to everybody, because it's vital that people know about this. But thank you
I
all.
agree.